Staff Sergeant Maya Chen adjusted her desert camouflage uniform for the third time in 10 minutes, the rough fabric scratching against skin that had seen too much sun and sand over the past 18 months. The forward operating base in Syria buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Helicopters landing and taking off, supply trucks rumbling past, and soldiers moving with the purposeful urgency that defined military life in a combat zone. She stood outside Commander William Torres's office, wondering why she'd been summoned. Maya had kept her head down since arriving at FOB Sentinel 3 weeks ago, focusing on her communications duties and avoiding the kind of attention that came with being one of only 12 women on a base of 300 soldiers. Her reputation had followed her here. The quiet specialist who got things done without drama, who could make a radio work in a sandstorm and decrypt enemy communications faster than most people could read a menu. "Chen, get in here," Torres called from inside his office. Maya entered to find the commander studying a thick file spread across his desk. Torres was a career officer in his late 40s, the kind of man who'd earned his rank through competence rather than politics. His graying hair was cut military short, and his weathered face bore the lines of someone who'd spent decades making difficult decisions. He looked up as she approached his desk. "Have a seat, Sergeant." Maya settled into the metal chair across from his desk, keeping her posture straight and her hands folded in her lap. Through the small window behind Torres, she could see the perimeter fence and the endless expanse of desert beyond. "I've been reviewing your file," Torres said, tapping the papers with his index finger. "Interesting reading. Top of your class in communication school, advanced certifications in signal intelligence, fluent in Arabic and Farsi, decorated twice for actions in Afghanistan." He paused, studying her face. "But there are gaps. Periods where your assignments are redacted or classified at levels I don't have clearance for." Maya kept her expression neutral. "I serve wherever the Army needs me, sir." Torres leaned back in his chair. "I'm sure you do. The thing is, Chen, I run a tight operation here. No surprises, no mysteries, no unknowns. Every person on this base is an open book to me." He gestured toward her file. "But you're not, are you?" "Sir, I don't understand what you're asking." "I'm asking why a staff sergeant with your qualifications is pulling routine communication duty at a forward operating base instead of working at some classified facility in Virginia." Torres stood and walked around his desk, stopping directly in front of her. "I'm asking why your medical records show treatments for injuries that don't match any of your official deployment records. And I'm asking why 3 different intelligence agencies have flags on your file that I'm not allowed to read." Maya's pulse quickened, but she maintained her composure. This was exactly the kind of scrutiny she'd hoped to avoid. "Sir, with respect, I follow orders. If there are questions about my assignments or my record, those would need to be directed to people above my pay grade." "I'm sure." Torres returned to his chair. "Here's the thing, Chen. In 2 days, we're hosting a joint operation with Syrian Democratic Forces. High-value target, sensitive location. I need to know that everyone on my team is exactly who they claim to be." The room fell silent except for the distant sound of a generator humming outside. Maya realized this was more than routine paranoia. Something had triggered Torres's suspicions about her specifically. "Sir, if you have concerns about my fitness for duty, stand up," Torres said suddenly. Maya rose from her chair, confused. "Remove your uniform jacket." "Sir?" "That's an order, Sergeant." Maya hesitated. Military protocol required her to follow lawful orders, but this felt like it was heading somewhere dangerous. Still, she unbuttoned her desert camouflage jacket and laid it across the back of her chair. Underneath, she wore the standard tan undershirt that all soldiers wore in the desert. Torres studied her carefully, his eyes moving from her face down to her arms. Maya's heart rate spiked as she realized what he was looking for. "Roll up your sleeves," he said. This was it. Maya had known this moment would come eventually, had planned for it, but she'd hoped for more time. She slowly pushed up the sleeves of her undershirt, revealing lean, muscular forearms, marked with the kind of scars that came from close-quarters combat and specialized training. Torres's eyes fixed on her left wrist, where a small, intricate tattoo was now visible. The design was barely larger than a silver dollar, a coiled serpent with its fangs bared, rendered in black ink so dark it seemed to absorb light. The snake's scales were detailed with microscopic precision, and its eyes held tiny flecks of red that were only visible from certain angles. The commander went completely still, his face drained of color, and Maya watched as recognition dawned in his eyes. She knew that look. She'd seen it before, years ago, from the only other person who'd ever identified her mark. "Jesus Christ," Torres whispered, sinking back into his chair. "You're Midnight Viper." Maya felt the familiar weight of her secret pressing down on her shoulders. The tattoo that marked her as one of the most elite soldiers in the U.S. military was also the thing that made a normal life impossible. She'd spent the last year trying to disappear into the regular army, hoping to find some peace after 8 years of missions that officially didn't exist. "Sir, I can explain." "Explain?" Torres laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Explain what? That I've had one of the most classified operatives in the military running comm checks and inventorying supplies for 3 weeks? That the woman I've been treating like a routine staff sergeant is someone who's killed more high-value targets than most entire special operations units?" Maya remained standing, uncertain whether she should sit back down or prepare to leave. The conversation had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Torres ran his hands through his hair and stared at her for a long moment. "How many people know?" "Know what, sir?" "Don't play games with me, Chen. Or is that even your real name?" "Maya Chen is my real name." "And currently you're the only person at this base who knows about my previous assignments." Torres stood again and walked to his window, looking out at the desert. "Previous assignments? That's what we're calling them?" He turned back to her. "The Midnight Viper program was supposed to be terminated 2 years ago. Every operator was either reassigned to conventional units or discharged." "That's correct, sir." "So what are you doing here? And don't tell me you just happened to get assigned to my base by coincidence." Maya had dreaded this question because the honest answer would raise even more concerns. "I requested this assignment, sir. I wanted to serve in a conventional role." "You requested it." Torres's voice carried a note of disbelief. "Someone with your capabilities requested to be sent to a forward operating base to run radio checks." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Maya looked down at her hands, then back up at Torres. "Because I was tired, sir. Tired of missions where success was measured in body counts. Tired of spending months at a time in countries that don't appear on any map, working with people whose names I'll never know. Tired of coming back from operations and not being able to tell anyone where I'd been or what I'd done." She paused. "I wanted to be a soldier again instead of a ghost." Torres studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Maya knew he wouldn't find any. Everything she'd just told him was true, even if it wasn't complete. "The Midnight Viper program produced 12 operators over 8 years, Torres said slowly. "According to the classified briefings I received when I made Colonel, those 12 individuals were responsible for neutralizing over 200 high-value targets across 43 countries. The program was so successful that it scared even the people who created it." Maya nodded. She knew the statistics better than anyone. "And you were one of the 12? "Yes, sir." Torres returned to his desk and opened her file again. "Your official record shows deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, but Midnight Viper operators worked everywhere. Pakistan, Iran, North Korea, Somalia, Libya. Places where American soldiers aren't supposed to be." "I can't discuss specific operations, sir." "I'm not asking you to." I'm trying to understand why someone with your background is content to sit in a comm tent and monitor radio traffic. Maya considered her answer carefully. Because monitoring radio traffic means people are alive to use their radios, sir. Because inventory duty means supplies are reaching the soldiers who need them. Because routine assignments mean that somewhere the system is working the way it's supposed to work. Torres closed her file and leaned back in his chair. You know I'm going to have to report this. I understand, sir. No, I don't think you do. Torres's voice carried a note of concern. The joint operation I mentioned, it's not routine. We've identified a high-value target that's been moving through this region for months. Someone the regular Syrian Democratic Forces can't touch because he's too well protected and too smart. Someone who requires the kind of specialized approach that only a few people in the world are capable of executing. Maya felt a familiar chill run down her spine. She knew where this conversation was heading. Sir, with respect, I'm no longer qualified for that type of mission. I've been out of the specialized training rotation for over a year. I wouldn't be effective. Bullshit. Torres's interruption was sharp. You don't unlearn the kind of skills you developed in Midnight Viper. They're not like riding a bicycle. They're more like breathing. Automatic, unconscious, permanent. Maya knew he was right, but that didn't mean she wanted to hear it. Sir, I respectfully request to remain in my current assignment. Torres stood and walked around his desk again, but this time he stopped at the window instead of approaching her. What if I told you that the target we've identified is responsible for coordinating attacks that have killed over 30 American soldiers in the past 6 months? I would say that's what Special Operations Forces are for, sir. What if I told you that he's planning something big, something that could kill hundreds of civilians? Maya didn't respond immediately. She recognized the approach. It was the same way her Midnight Viper handlers had always presented missions. Appeal to duty, to the greater good, to the unique capabilities that made her irreplaceable. Sir, there are other operators, people who are currently active, currently trained. There are no other operators. Torres turned from the window to face her. The Midnight Viper program was terminated, remember? The other 11 operators were either reassigned to conventional units like you, or they were discharged from the military entirely. You're the only one still in the system, and you're the only one in position to handle this target. Maya felt the walls of Torres's office closing in around her. This was exactly what she'd been trying to escape. The sense that she was trapped by her own abilities, doomed to be called back into service whenever a situation arose that required her particular skill set. I need time to think about this, sir. You have 24 hours, Torres said. After that, I'm making the call to my superiors. And this decision gets taken out of both our hands. Maya nodded and reached for her uniform jacket. As she put it on, Torres spoke again. Chen, one more thing. She looked up at him. That tattoo. You need to keep it covered. If word gets out that there's a former Midnight Viper operator on this base, it could compromise the entire operation. Understood, sir. As Maya left Torres's office, she felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her more heavily than ever. The tattoo on her wrist seemed to burn against her skin, a permanent reminder of the life she'd tried so hard to leave behind. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she walked across the base toward her quarters. Other soldiers moved around her, going about their daily routines. Unaware that their quiet communications specialist was one of the most lethal operatives the U.S. military had ever produced. Maya knew that Torres was right about one thing. She couldn't unlearn the skills that had made her effective as a Midnight Viper operator. The training was too thorough, too deeply ingrained. Even now, as she walked across the base, she automatically cataloged potential threats, escape routes, and tactical advantages. It was exhausting to be constantly aware, constantly ready, constantly prepared for violence. But she also knew that Torres was wrong about something else. There were other options, other ways to handle high-value targets. The problem was that those other ways were often messier, more dangerous, and less certain. Midnight Viper operators had been trained to eliminate problems with surgical precision, leaving minimal collateral damage and maximum strategic impact. That evening, Maya sat on her narrow bunk and stared at the tattoo on her wrist. The serpent's eyes seemed to stare back at her, reminding her of missions she'd rather forget. She thought about the 30 American soldiers Torres had mentioned, about the hundreds of civilians who might be at risk. She thought about the comfortable routine she'd built for herself over the past year, and about the quiet satisfaction she'd found in ordinary military duties. Most of all, she thought about the other 11 operators who had shared her training, her experiences, her burden. She wondered where they were now, whether they'd found the peace she'd been seeking, whether they ever missed the clarity that came with having a clear mission and the tools to accomplish it. As midnight approached, Maya made her decision. She reached for her secure communication device and began composing a message that would change everything once again. The Midnight Viper was about to emerge from hiding, whether she wanted to or not. The serpent on her wrist seemed to coil more tightly as she worked, as if it knew that its time of dormancy was coming to an end. Maya had tried to become a regular soldier, but some transformations were too profound to reverse. Some identities were too powerful to abandon. By morning, she would be Maya Chen, Staff Sergeant in the U.S. Army. But by tomorrow night, she would once again be what she had never really stopped being, one of the most dangerous people alive. Maya's secure message had been sent at 0347 hours, and by 0600, her encrypted phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number she recognized but had hoped never to see again. The caller ID simply read, Control, but Maya knew it was Colonel Sarah Martinez, the woman who had run the Midnight Viper program from its inception until its termination. Chen. Martinez's voice carried the same crisp authority it had possessed 3 years ago. I got your message. Are you certain about the situation? Maya sat on the edge of her bunk, keeping her voice low despite being alone in her quarters. Commander Torres recognized the mark. He knows what I am. What you were, Martinez corrected. The program is terminated, remember? Tell that to Torres. He wants me to take a mission. There was a pause on the line. Maya could hear the familiar background noise of the Pentagon, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the constant hum of activity that never stopped in the building that ran America's military operations. Describe the target, Martinez said finally. He didn't give me details, just said it was a high-value individual responsible for killing 30 American soldiers. Someone the regular SOF units can't touch. Another pause. Maya heard papers shuffling on Martinez's end of the line. Chen, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. There's a target in your area of operations that we've been tracking for 18 months. Syrian national, trained by Iranian Quds Force, specializes in asymmetric warfare. Goes by the name Abu Khalil, but his real identity is Rashid Qassem. He's not just killing American soldiers. He's preparing something bigger. Maya felt her stomach tighten. How much bigger? Chemical weapons, stolen from Syrian government stockpiles during the chaos 3 years ago. Intelligence suggests he's planning to deploy them against civilian populations in refugee camps, then blame it on American forces to turn the entire region against us. Jesus. The timeline is accelerated. We have 48 hours, maybe less, before he moves the weapons to a position where we can't reach them. Every conventional approach has failed because Qassem is too smart, too well protected, and too familiar with our standard operating procedures. Maya closed her eyes, knowing what was coming next. You know why you're the only option, Chen. Qassem has never encountered a Midnight Viper operator. He's prepared for Delta Force, prepared for SEALs, prepared for Rangers. He's not prepared for someone with your training. Colonel, with respect, I've been out of the program for over a year. I'm not current on bullshit. Martinez's interruption was sharp. We both know that Midnight Viper training doesn't fade. It's not something you can turn off like a light switch. Maya knew Martinez was right, but that didn't make the conversation easier. The Midnight Viper program had been designed to create operators who could function independently in hostile territory for extended periods, eliminating high-value targets with minimal support and maximum discretion. The training had been brutal, comprehensive, and transformative. She remembered her first day at the classified facility in Nevada, where she'd been one of 24 candidates selected from across all branches of the military. The criteria had been stringent: exceptional physical conditioning, demonstrated combat experience, psychological profiles indicating high intelligence and emotional stability, and most importantly, the ability to make life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure. Only 12 candidates had completed the program. The training had lasted 18 months and covered everything from advanced marksmanship to explosives, from foreign languages to psychological manipulation. They'd learned to disappear into foreign cultures, to assume identities so thoroughly that they believed them themselves, to kill without hesitation and disappear without a trace. But the most important part of the training had been learning to operate alone. Midnight Viper operators worked without backup, without extraction plans, without the safety net that other special operations forces relied on. They were inserted into hostile territory with minimal equipment and expected to accomplish their missions regardless of circumstances. "Chen, you still there?" Martinez's voice pulled Maya back to the present. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Here's what's going to happen. In 3 hours, you're going to receive new orders transferring you to a classified assignment. Your commander won't be able to object because the orders will come from levels he can't question. You'll be given a cover story about intelligence liaison work. And the real mission? Locate and eliminate Rashid Qassem before he can deploy chemical weapons against civilian targets. Timeline is 48 hours from now." Maya felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. It was a feeling she'd hoped never to experience again, the knowledge that hundreds or thousands of lives depended on her actions, and her actions alone. "What support will I have?" "Minimal. The whole point of this approach is that Qassem won't see it coming. Too much support infrastructure creates too many signatures, too many opportunities for compromise. You'll have the same kind of loadout you carried on solo operations. Enough equipment to get the job done, not enough to weigh you down." Maya stood and walked to her small window, looking out at the desert landscape that stretched to the horizon. Somewhere out there, a man was preparing to commit mass murder, and she was apparently the only person in position to stop him. "Colonel, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Why was the program really terminated?" The official reason was budgetary constraints and shifting strategic priorities, but that never made sense. Midnight Viper was too successful, too cost-effective to cancel for money reasons. There was a long silence on the line. Maya waited, knowing that Martinez was deciding how much truth to reveal. "Chen, what I'm about to tell you cannot leave this conversation. Are we clear?" "Clear, ma'am." The program was terminated because it worked too well. In 8 years, Midnight Viper operators eliminated over 200 high-value targets across 43 countries. The success rate was unprecedented, but so was the psychological cost. Of the 12 operators who completed the program, 4 required extended psychiatric treatment, 3 requested discharge from the military entirely, and 2... Martinez paused. 2 couldn't readjust to civilian life at all. Maya knew about the 2 who couldn't readjust. She'd been at both funerals. The program created the most effective killers the military had ever seen, but it also created people who couldn't function in normal society. The Psychological Evaluation Board concluded that continued operation of the program would be inhumane to the operators themselves. And yet here we are. Martinez agreed. Because sometimes the world presents us with problems that can only be solved by people with your specific capabilities, regardless of the personal cost. Maya understood. She'd always understood, even when she'd tried to pretend otherwise. The Midnight Viper program had changed her at a fundamental level, had turned her into something that was incredibly valuable in specific circumstances and difficult to integrate into normal society the rest of the time. "I'll need detailed intelligence on Qasem," Maya said, accepting the inevitable. "Already being compiled. You'll have everything we know about his habits, his security protocols, his associates, and his current location by 1200 hours. Equipment? The same loadout you preferred on solo operations, modified M4, suppressed sidearm, explosives, communications gear, and insertion equipment, plus whatever specialized items the mission requires." Maya nodded, even though Martinez couldn't see her. The conversation was feeling more familiar now, falling into patterns she remembered from dozens of similar briefings over the years. Extraction plan? Same as always. You make your own. We'll have assets in the region if you need emergency support, but the mission profile calls for you to eliminate the target and disappear before anyone realizes what happened. Understood. Chen, one more thing. Your current commander, Torres, he's going to want to be involved in the mission planning. That can't happen. This operation is classified at levels that don't exist in his world. Can you handle that situation? Maya thought about Torres, about his obvious competence and his genuine concern for his soldiers. He wasn't going to like being shut out of an operation taking place in his area of responsibility. "I can handle it." "Good. Your orders will arrive in 2 hours and 43 minutes. After that, Maya Chen, the communications specialist, disappears, and you become what you've always been, the most dangerous person in a very dangerous world." The line went dead, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. She looked down at the tattoo on her wrist, at the serpent that had marked her as one of the elite for the past 8 years. The creature seemed more vivid now, as if it knew that it was about to be unleashed again. Maya spent the next 2 hours preparing mentally for what was coming. She went through the routines that had served her well during her active years with the program, meditation exercises to clear her mind, physical warm-ups to prepare her body, and most importantly, the psychological preparation that allowed her to become someone capable of taking another person's life without hesitation. It was this last part that had made readjustment to civilian life so difficult. The Midnight Viper training had required her to compartmentalize her emotions, to separate her personal identity from her operational identity. When she was on a mission, Maya Chen ceased to exist, replaced by someone who could make the hard choices and live with the consequences. At 11:57 hours, a courier arrived at Torres's office with a sealed envelope bearing classification markings that made the base commander's eyes widen. Maya was summoned immediately. She found Torres studying the orders with a mixture of confusion and frustration. "Chen, according to these documents, you're being transferred immediately to classified duties under the direction of someone called Control. The orders are signed by people I've never heard of at levels that are above my clearance grade." "Yes, sir." "Want to explain to me what's happening here?" Maya had prepared for this conversation during her mental preparation time. "Sir, I can't discuss the details of my new assignment, but I can tell you that it relates to the high-value target you mentioned yesterday." Torres leaned back in his chair. "The target I wanted you to help us eliminate." "Yes, sir. And now you're being pulled off my base to handle it through different channels." "That appears to be the case, sir." Torres was quiet for several minutes, studying her face. Maya could see him processing the implications, understanding that he was being outmaneuvered by people operating at levels far above his own authority. "This is about that tattoo, isn't it? About what you really are?" "I can't comment on that, sir." Torres stood and walked to his window, just as he had the day before. Chen, I want you to know that I don't like being cut out of operations in my own area of responsibility. But I also understand that there are some things that require specialized approaches. Yes, sir. What I don't understand is why someone with your capabilities was wasting away in a communications tent instead of being utilized for missions like this from the beginning. Maya considered her answer carefully. Sir, sometimes the most valuable assets are the ones that nobody knows exist until they're absolutely necessary. Torres turned from the window to face her. And now you're absolutely necessary. It would appear so, sir. Any idea when you might be returning to normal duties? Maya knew the answer to that question, but she couldn't share it with Torres. Once she completed this mission, she would disappear again, but probably not back to routine military duties. The Midnight Viper program might be officially terminated, but operators like her would always be called upon when situations arose that conventional forces couldn't handle. I don't have that information, sir. Torres nodded slowly. Well, Chen, or whoever you really are, I want you to know that it's been a privilege having you on my base, even if I didn't understand what I was dealing with at the time. Thank you, sir. It's been an honor serving with you. One last thing, Torres said. That tattoo, keep it covered until you're off my base. I don't need my soldiers asking questions I can't answer. Maya nodded and left Torres's office for what she knew would be the last time. As she walked across the base toward the helicopter landing pad where her transportation was waiting, she felt the familiar transformation beginning to occur. The quiet communications specialist was fading away, replaced by the lethal operative who had earned the right to wear the Midnight Viper mark. The helicopter that arrived to collect her was a nondescript transport that could have belonged to any military or civilian organization. The pilot asked no questions, and Maya offered no conversation. As they lifted off from FOB Sentinel, she looked down at the base that had been her home for 3 weeks, knowing that the soldiers below would never know how close they had come to having their lives disrupted by chemical weapons. During the flight, Maya received her mission briefing through an encrypted tablet. The intelligence on Rashid Qasim was comprehensive. Photos, behavioral analysis, known associates, safe houses, and most importantly, his current location in a compound 30 kilometers northwest of Aleppo. The file revealed a man who had devoted his life to asymmetric warfare against Western forces. He was intelligent, ruthless, and absolutely committed to his cause. The chemical weapons he had acquired were Syrian government VX nerve agent, stolen during the chaos of the civil war and hidden for 3 years while he planned their deployment. According to the intelligence, Qassem planned to release the nerve agent in 3 separate refugee camps, timing the attacks to coincide with a planned humanitarian aid distribution. The death toll would be in the thousands, and the chaos would effectively end American involvement in the region. Maya studied Qassem's photograph, memorizing every detail of his face. Tomorrow night, this man would be dead, and the threat he represented would be eliminated. It was that simple, and that complicated. As the helicopter carried her toward her insertion point, Maya felt the last vestiges of her normal identity slipping away. The woman who had spent 3 weeks running radio checks and inventorying supplies was gone, replaced by someone who had been trained to be the ultimate solution to problems that couldn't be solved any other way. The Midnight Viper was operational once again. Maya's insertion point was a barren ridge overlooking the Euphrates River, 3 kilometers southeast of Qassem's compound. The helicopter had dropped her at 0300 hours under a moonless sky. And now she lay motionless in a shallow depression between 2 boulders, studying her target through night vision optics. The compound was exactly as described in the intelligence briefing, a rectangular concrete structure surrounded by a 12-foot wall topped with razor wire. Guard towers occupied 3 corners, with sentries visible as heat signatures through her thermal imaging scope. Motion sensors and cameras covered the perimeter, and Maya counted at least 16 armed men patrolling the grounds in overlapping patterns. It was a fortress, designed to withstand assault by conventional forces. But Maya wasn't conventional forces. She'd spent the past 18 hours reconning the compound, mapping guard rotations, identifying weaknesses in the security perimeter, and most importantly, locating Rashid Qassem himself. The terrorist leader followed a predictable routine: morning prayers at Oro 5:30, breakfast at Oro 600, meetings with his lieutenants from Oros 800 to 1000, and personal time in his private quarters from 2200 to 0500. It was during this personal time that Maya would strike. Her equipment lay arranged beside her in the desert sand: a suppressed M4 rifle modified for silent operation, a .45 caliber pistol with custom ammunition, plastic explosives with delayed action detonators, and an assortment of specialized tools that most soldiers never saw. Everything she needed to eliminate one man and disappear without a trace. Maya checked her watch. 2145 hours. Qassem would be retiring to his quarters in 15 minutes, following the same routine he'd maintained for the past 3 weeks. Intelligence indicated that he spent his evenings reading, planning, and communicating with his network of supporters across the region. Tonight, his routine would be interrupted permanently. Maya began her approach at 2200 hours, moving across the desert terrain with the fluid precision that had made Midnight Viper operators legendary among those few people who knew they existed. She covered the 3 kilometers to the compound's perimeter in 45 minutes, avoiding the patrol routes she'd memorized during her surveillance. The compound's eastern wall faced away from the guard towers, creating a blind spot that lasted exactly 90 seconds during each patrol cycle. Maya reached the wall during this window, used a small explosive charge to create a hole just large enough for her to crawl through, and was inside the perimeter before the next patrol arrived. The interior of the compound was laid out like a small military base, with barracks for the guards, storage buildings, a communications center, and Qassem's private residence at the center. Maya moved between the buildings like a shadow, avoiding the security cameras and motion sensors through a combination of timing and intimate knowledge of their coverage patterns. She reached Qassem's residence at 2247 hours, exactly on schedule. The building was a 2-story concrete structure with reinforced windows and a single entrance guarded by 2 sentries. Maya watched the guards from her concealed position behind a storage shed, noting their alertness levels, their weapons, and most importantly, their positioning relative to the door they were protecting. At 2255 hours, the guards received a radio call that lasted 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Maya had been expecting this. Intelligence indicated that the compound's communication center ran routine security checks every hour, requiring guards to confirm their positions and status. While the guards were distracted by their radio check, Maya moved. She crossed the open space between the storage shed and the residence in 12 seconds, approaching from the guard's blind spot. The first sentry never knew what happened. Maya's knife found the gap between his skull and his first cervical vertebra, severing his spinal cord instantly and silently. The second guard had time to turn toward the sound of his partner's body hitting the ground, but Maya's suppressed pistol put 2 rounds into his chest before he could raise his weapon or cry out. Both men were dead within 15 seconds, and Maya was through the door before their bodies had finished falling. The interior of the residence was spartanly furnished but comfortable, with traditional Syrian decor and modern security equipment. Maya moved through the ground floor quickly, clearing each room and confirming that the building's layout matched her intelligence briefings. She found the staircase to the second floor at the rear of the building, exactly where it was supposed to be. Maya climbed the stairs slowly, testing each step for creaks or movement that might alert Qassem to her presence. The man she'd come to kill was directly above her now, perhaps reading or planning his next attack, unaware that his life was about to end. At the top of the stairs, Maya found herself in a hallway with 3 doors, 2 bedrooms and a study. Light showed under the door of the study, and Maya could hear the faint sound of papers rustling inside. She approached the study door and listened carefully. One person, moving around the room, occasionally sitting down. The sound pattern matched what she would expect from someone working alone at a desk. Maya tested the door handle slowly. Unlocked. She eased the door open just far enough to see inside. Rashid Qassem sat at a large wooden desk with his back to the door, studying what appeared to be maps and documents. He was exactly as his photographs had shown him, a thin man in his 50s with graying hair, and the kind of intense focus that came from absolute commitment to a cause. On the desk beside him, Maya could see photographs of refugee camps and what looked like timing schedules. The chemical weapons attack he was planning was less than 24 hours away. Maya slipped into the room silently, her suppressed pistol drawn and ready. She was 3 steps inside when Qassem spoke without turning around. "I was wondering when you would arrive." Maya froze, her weapon trained on the back of Qassem's head, processing this unexpected development. Had her approach been detected? Was this a trap? Qassem slowly raised his hands above his head, still not turning around. "Please, do not shoot immediately. I have something to show you that will change your understanding of this situation." "Turn around slowly," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Keep your hands visible." Qassem complied, rotating his chair to face her. Up close, his face showed the weathering of a man who had spent decades in conflict zones, but his eyes held an intelligence that Maya found unsettling. "You are not what I expected," Qassem said calmly. "What did you expect?" "A team. Multiple operators, extensive support, the overwhelming force that Americans prefer to use. Instead, they send one woman." He paused, studying her face. "Unless you are not actually American." Maya kept her weapon trained on Qassem's center mass. "The chemical weapons. Where are they?" Qassem smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Ah, so you do know why you are here. That is reassuring. I was beginning to think that your intelligence services had completely misunderstood the situation." "Answer the question." "The chemical weapons are not here. They were moved yesterday to their deployment positions." "Even if you kill me now, which I assume you intend to do, you cannot stop what is about to happen." Maya felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. If Qassem was telling the truth, her mission had already failed before it began. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Check the desk behind me. You will find the deployment schedules, the timing plans, everything your analyst would need to confirm that the weapons are already in position." Maya moved carefully around the desk, keeping her weapon trained on Qassem while using her peripheral vision to scan the documents he'd indicated. What she saw made her blood run cold. The papers were exactly what Qassem had described: detailed plans for coordinated chemical weapons attacks on 3 refugee camps, scheduled to begin at 0600 hours the following morning. According to the documents, the weapons had been moved into position 36 hours ago. "You see," Qassem said, "killing me accomplishes nothing except personal satisfaction. The attacks will proceed as planned." Maya's mind raced through the implications. If the weapons were already deployed, stopping the attacks would require a completely different approach, one that would involve Syrian government forces, Turkish military units, and possibly Russian assets, the kind of coordination that would take days or weeks to arrange. "However," Qassem continued, "I am prepared to make you an offer. I don't make deals with terrorists." "Of course you do. Your entire military philosophy is based on calculated compromises, acceptable losses, collateral damage, strategic trade-offs. Everything is negotiable if the price is right." Maya remained silent. But she continued to study the deployment documents while keeping her weapon ready. "The chemical weapons can be recalled," Qassem said. "My teams are disciplined and loyal, but they follow my orders absolutely. If I send the correct coded message, the attacks will be cancelled and the weapons will be returned to secure storage. What do you want in return? Safe passage out of Syria for myself and my immediate family. New identities, financial resources, and sanctuary in a country of my choosing. Maya understood the calculation Qasim was presenting. Trade one man's freedom for thousands of innocent lives. From a purely strategic perspective, it was an obvious choice. But Maya had been trained to eliminate high-value targets, not to negotiate with them. Her mission parameters were clear: kill Qasim and neutralize the threat he represented. Accepting his offer would mean allowing a terrorist leader to escape justice in exchange for stopping an attack that he had planned and organized. "You have 30 seconds to decide," Qasim said. "After that, my teams will lose communication with me, and they will assume I have been killed or captured. The attacks will proceed automatically." Maya's training warred with her instincts. Everything she had learned during her years with the Midnight Viper program told her to pull the trigger and complete her mission. But the rational part of her mind recognized that thousands of lives hung in the balance. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" "You do not. But you know that I will keep my word because my survival depends on it. If the attacks proceed after I have agreed to cancel them, you will hunt me down wherever I try to hide. I have studied American Special Operations Forces extensively. I know that you never stop hunting your targets." Qasim was right about that. Maya had pursued targets across continents and through years-long investigations. The American military did not forget, and it did not forgive. 15 seconds, Qasim said. Maya made her decision. "Send the recall message." Qasim nodded and reached slowly for a secure communication device on his desk. Maya watched as he entered a complex series of codes, then transmitted a brief message in Arabic. "It is done," he said, setting the device back on the desk. "The attacks have been canceled. My teams will return the weapons to secure storage and await further instructions, which they will never receive. Perhaps. That depends on whether you honor our agreement." Maya lowered her weapon slightly, but kept it ready. "The agreement was that you cancel the attacks. I never agreed to let you escape." Qasim's eyes widened in understanding, but he had no time to respond. Maya's suppressed pistol put 2 rounds into his chest, and he slumped forward onto his desk, dead before his head hit the wooden surface. Maya immediately secured the communication device Qasim had used, along with all the documents related to the chemical weapons deployment. The recall message had been sent, but she needed to confirm that Qasim's teams had actually received and acted on it. She activated her own communication equipment and transmitted a priority message to Control, reporting the successful elimination of the target and requesting immediate verification that the chemical weapons had been secured. The response came back within 10 minutes. Satellite surveillance confirmed that teams at all 3 refugee camps had departed their positions and were returning to their base locations. The chemical weapons threat had been neutralized. Maya completed her mission by placing small explosive charges throughout Qasim's residence, timed to detonate 30 minutes after her departure. The explosion would destroy any remaining intelligence materials and make it appear that Qasim had died in an accident or internal power struggle. She exited the compound the same way she had entered, moving through the perimeter security during the patrol cycle gaps she had memorized. By the time the guards discovered the bodies at Qasim's residence, Maya was 3 kilometers away and moving toward her extraction point. The helicopter pickup occurred at 05:30 hours, exactly as scheduled. As Maya lifted off from the Syrian desert, she could see smoke rising from Qasim's compound in the distance. According to the cover story that would be disseminated through intelligence channels, the terrorist leader had died when a weapons cache exploded during a meeting with his lieutenants. During the flight back to her temporary base, Maya reflected on the mission that had forced her out of hiding and back into the world of targeted elimination. She had saved thousands of lives by killing one man, which was exactly the kind of strategic calculation that the Midnight Viper program had been designed to make. But she also understood that this mission would not be her last. There would always be another Rashid Qassem, another threat that required the specific skills she had developed, another situation where conventional military forces were insufficient and extraordinary measures were necessary. The tattoo on her wrist seemed to pulse with renewed life as the helicopter carried her away from the mission zone. Maya had tried to leave the Midnight Viper program behind, but she now understood that the program had never left her. She was what she had always been, one of 12 people in the world with the training, the capability, and the willingness to make the hard choices that kept civilization functioning. 3 days later, Maya received new orders transferring her to a classified assignment with the Defense Intelligence Agency. The cover story indicated routine analyst work, but Maya knew better. She would be held in reserve, ready for deployment whenever a situation arose that required her unique capabilities. Maya Chen, the quiet communications specialist who had spent 3 weeks at FOB Sentinel, had ceased to exist. In her place was someone more dangerous, more necessary, and more alone than most people could imagine. But as Maya packed her few personal belongings and prepared for her new assignment, she realized that she had found a kind of peace in accepting what she really was. The struggle to be normal had been exhausting and ultimately futile. She was a Midnight Viper operator, one of the most effective weapons in the American military arsenal, and there was a strange satisfaction in embracing that identity completely. The serpent tattoo on her wrist would remain covered during her daily activities, but Maya no longer felt the need to hide from what it represented. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she had been trained to do. The world was a dangerous place, full of people like Rashid Qassem who were willing to commit mass murder to achieve their goals. But it was also a world protected by people like Maya Chen, who were willing to make the ultimate sacrifices to stop them. As her transport aircraft lifted off for her new assignment, Maya looked down at the desert landscape one last time. Somewhere below, refugee camps were going about their daily routines, unaware that they had been saved by a woman they would never meet, whose actions they would never know about. It was enough. It had always been enough. The Midnight Viper was operational, and the world was a little bit safer because of it.